Everybody wants to say, I just want to be a race car driver. I just want to drive the race cars. Well, guess what? It's not that simple. I wish it was that easy.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Racer on Demand show. I'm Amanda Vandenelzen, and with me, I have Megan Meyer, and we have a special guest today. On our podcast today, we have Kelley Earnhardt-Miller. Some of you may know her from the NASCAR world, but I know her from the off-road world, where her son, Wyatt Miller, races against my husband, Chris Vandenelzen. So I'm so excited that she has agreed to come on today. Kelley, for those who don't know you very well, would you mind giving us just a rundown on what your background in racing is and what your role really looks like today?
Yeah, good morning. It's awesome to be here with you guys and all your listeners. I'm excited to be on here. See you pop up on my social every now and then. So I was happy when I sent you a note. It was like, hey, if you ever want me to be on, I'd be happy to. So very
Yes.
cool to be on here with you ladies. So kind of born into really the NASCAR world. My father was a 7-time NASCAR champion, Dale Earnhardt. And so therein lies my brother, Dale Earnhardt Jr., total racing family. My grandpa Ralph started racing in what would be the Sportsman Series, which has now grown into the Cup Series. And so racing is all we've ever known. I've got 3 kids. They're 25, 20, and you mentioned Wyatt, who just turned 14. All racing from time to time in various different disciplines. And I've been working for my brother since we lost our father in 2001. So I came to work with him shortly thereafter, and I manage all of his business interests. So through the years, I've managed all the contracts and relationships with the teams that he's driven for, all of our partnership uh, PSA partners. And then we started our race team in the late 2000s. We have 4 Xfinity teams that race on Saturdays in the NASCAR world. We also have late model stock teams that race the Cars Tour, which is a division, and then also Saturday night racing that a lot of folks are probably familiar with. And I still continue to manage Dell's businesses. We got a lot of different things going on with Whiskey River, which is a bar and restaurant in several airports. He's involved in an air filtration business called Filter Time. He just started a new Jerky Boys beef jerky product. I'll have to bring some of that to the truck races. It's really good. So yeah, so do all things. Got 100 and was just told on Friday, 153 employees. I always say 140, but we've been growing lately. So lots going on.
That's
Yeah, that
awesome.
is a lot. So I want to share a quick story real fast. And so Amanda probably knows this, but around this time last year, because I'm friends with Justin, who has the Pro 4 truck, and
Uh-huh.
he rented out Wheatland to test. And Ryan Beat was there with his team. And so I have never been to a short course race before. I had never heard of Ryan Beat. And so all I knew was Justin and Chris and Amanda. And so I went there because Justin was letting me test his side by side. And it was the very first time I've had a side by side on a track. And so it was really cool. I got to do that. But there was these other kids there that were testing out the trucks, and I had no idea who they were. And it was so funny because then like I was telling my husband about it, and I was like, yeah, there was this like little boy and little girl that were also practicing too. And it ended up being Wyatt and Gray. And like I had no idea who they were or how successful they were gonna be. But it was just so cool because I was like, oh yeah, it's just like little kids racing around. And then turns out like Wyatt is this, total BA, and it's just like, oh man, like I had no idea who he was, but yeah, he's had an amazing season. So it's been really cool to watch him and Chris battle it out on the track, and it makes for like really exciting racing. But on this podcast, we want to talk about the business side, the sponsorship side, the relationships. And so thank you for joining us today. So a lot of the racers that listen to the show, they are the beginners, the grassroots racers. They're in those in between stages. So they have the passion, but they want to get serious. They might not have that business acumen for it. So, was there any moments like when you and Dale were getting started, where you just realized, okay, this isn't just racing. Like, it's not just what we're doing for fun. We need to actually take it serious and treat it like a business.
It's funny because I think that the business of racing and the marketing side of it and all those things has really changed a lot since we first got involved. So,
Mhm.
um, whenever we were late model racing back in the 90s, I was writing, and I still have it. It's about a 50-page deck, right? But it's
Yeah.
typed and it's paragraph by paragraph by paragraph. It's like there wasn't social media, there wasn't all of those things. It was just like, more of the advertisement on the car.
Mhm.
And so, that's kind of when we were starting racing, the sponsorship aspect of it. Our dad started a late model stock team for the three of us to drive, and we had a sponsor that was affiliated with my dad and the mom and pops and Western Steer brand, like the mom and pops country ham. And so, that for us was to perform on the track well, and we would go and do things for the sponsor, go to their restaurants or whatever it might be. But it was really, then it was really be a good steward and representative of that brand and to tell people about it, right? And to get people
Mhm.
to go support them. Um, that all that has changed so much
Yeah.
since the onset of social media. I mean, we had MySpace, but we certainly weren't, you know, we weren't
Yeah.
using MySpace like we do all the social media these days, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not
Um,
selling ham to Tom.
yeah, yeah. It truly was just the social aspect of social media, right? And now there's such a business to it. It wasn't really that moment for me because it was always about representing your sponsor and taking care of your sponsor. The trick to this and talking about the people that listen to this podcast and what I get asked often too, is just how do I my kids racing, my son, my daughter, my whomever, we want to get sponsorship money. We race locally here at a track called Millbridge in Micros. And, a lot of people are always asking, how they can get funds to support, what they're doing. And it's so content driven to me these days from a social aspect, especially for the younger ones, because most people I feel like are supported by friends, family, local businesses, community, right? If they're from a small community, it's, wherever their parents, might get something done, work done to their car or something of that nature, right? So you've got these small business supporters that can support at such a grassroots level. They can't move up, certainly into a lot of the other disciplines. And so you got to bridge that gap to what that looks like, and you either catch someone's attention off of talent and performance in what you're doing, or you work really hard to network. You were talking about going to the Met 400 and the things that you're doing, networking with people, networking with companies, businesses, strategies, all that. But I think really to build something, thinking through like when I started racing in the 90s to what I'm trying to tell people to do today is like you got to stand out, you got to create content, you got to be interesting, you got to have a personality, and try to get those eyeballs and viewership, because it's not about just painting the race car with a bunch of fancy colors and stickers anymore. It's helpful, it's part of it, but it's not all of it anymore. And it's so much, to me, it's less expensive for companies to market through the digital and social age. It's really hard to talk them into spending the kind of money that it takes to, advertise in the different motorsport disciplines, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
So I never really had that moment because it was back then, that's what it was about. Back then it was show up for your sponsor, do well, tell them that, the bar is good at Western Sharon to come on over to the salad bar.
The salad bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that you kinda highlighted it's like an ecosystem, right? Social media comes into play. You mentioned being active in your community, networking, the activations that you talked about, going out to your sponsors, right? These are all things that are different ways to provide those values, and I think sometimes racers get hung up on just one of those, it's just the sticker on the car or it's just the social media, and it's like if you are able to offer that whole ecosystem of the connections, the activations, yes, the advertisement, the social media, that well rounded package is worth a lot more than any one of those pieces individually.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
Well said.
agree. Really starting it all is like the relationship aspect of things. That's why it's so important, I think, I was talking to someone over the weekend just about job openings in our sport, and how to that they were talking about how they hate in today's world that most everything is digital. You go online, you put your resume in, you fill out, whatever the application is online, and employers, we're one of them, they want you to go through that online experience. And then we have a formula for weeding out and matching things up. And she said, I wish I could just go talk to somebody, because I know if I can go talk to them, I can tell them so much more. And then they get to see your personality and then all these different things. And I was like, yeah, that it really stinks that it's that way. But it's hard to talk to 100 applicants when you can vet them over in a digital space, through that application part. So I get it. You know, it's really hard to do all those different things and figure out what that looks like, because somebody wants to walk in, hand your resume, talk to the hiring manager, talk to somebody. And I say all the time, go network, get into
Mhm.
business groups, get into, you know, go work for somebody for free if you have to. Go get involved in a team for nothing. And go help them on the weekends or whatever it looks like, because you're going to get into the foot traffic and the space of where those people live and exist. And then they get to know you, and then they get to see your personality, and then they get to see how hard you work, and then you're able to show them that kind of stuff. So it's important. And that networking piece and those relationships are what really support and grow the rest of what you're talking about, in terms of activation and social content and all this kind of stuff.
Yes. Yes, I love that, and it kinda makes me think about, right, we just got back from the Mint yesterday, and, we didn't know we were going to the Mint until Tuesday last week, and we left on Wednesday, by Wednesday morning, it was, "Oh, by the way, Chris is gonna be in a race car,"
I was
and
getting
I
ready to
was
say, not only did you not know you were going, then you got there, and then you found
Yeah.
out that, oh, okay, you get a shot to get in a.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I love
Yes.
that reel that you made.
Yes. But I was thinking,
Right?
like, how the heck did that even happen? And it came down to literally years of networking.
Mhm.
Like, a couple of years ago, before I even had my class 11, I wanted to ride along in a class 11 to see if I'd even like it. And I didn't know anybody in that space, nobody in the desert racing world at all. So I went into the class 11 junkies group on Facebook and I posted, like, I'm tiny and I am good at spotting short course, so I have experience with that. Like, I'm lightweight and I know what I'm doing for calling, the track and stuff. Somebody put me in their car for Crandon because I want in. And I had Josh Felix go, "Yeah, you can ride along with me." And I didn't know Josh at the time. And so I rode along at Crandon with Josh Felix, and then he connected me to the Shapiros who ran like the nitrocross bugs and whatnot, who are amazing people, by the way. And then when we were out at Hammers 2 years ago, we kind of pitted with them. We picked up my class 11, and their nephew Cole was racing in a side by side there. So we got to know Cole. Well, when I posted up saying, "Hey, we're going to the Mint and, what's good for networking and stuff," he private messaged me and said, "I need a navigator in my 1600 car this weekend. Can you
Nice.
or Chris suit up and go?" And I was like, well, Chris has all of his stuff and this is bucket list for him. But just thinking about, like,
Mhm.
I didn't network with those people because I wanted to ride in a car at the Mint for
Yeah, yeah.
100. This was literally years of just getting to know people in the spaces where that is valuable for me to know people. And that's so important for racers to understand, that intentional networking is not going in with the intention of selling something to somebody. It's going in with the intention of knowing people in the right spaces, that eventually you're going to know them well enough and have those relationships that the opportunities are going to be there for you because they know you.
Well, yeah, and
Mhm.
as you're telling that story, I was thinking about, immediate gratification, right? And that's what people are looking for, when, like
Yes.
you said, going in and networking with some sort of intention that you're going to walk away with something tangible, whether it's money or support or whatever. Building those relationships and networking take time. And
Yeah.
that's something, I mean, you just explained a beautiful example of that was years of networking, a relationship, trust in various situations that you encountered that then brought this opportunity to the forefront. So I think that's really important for people to understand too, is that, you just never know when that opportunity is going to come, and
Mhm.
what that's going to look like. We have 3 female engineers here at Junior Motorsports now, which excites me so much. Our first one came through a networking situation at the Lynn St. James women's
Oh,
event
Women with
that she
Drive.
puts on. Yeah,
Yep.
this was probably 3 or 4 years ago, and I spoke, and there was a group of girls there, ladies there from a local school, and they all come up and want to talk and give me the resumes and everything. And this one girl just hit right, and she followed up with me later, which is also important. You don't need to be pesky. You need to have some persistence, but you can't be pesky. But you do have to ask again, remind, do those kinds of things, right? Because especially in today's world, so busy. I hear stories all the time from especially aspiring racers from back in the day. My husband's one of them. He said, I didn't put myself out there enough. I was good at what I did. I was talented. But I didn't work these relationships and put myself and stay on top of it. If somebody told me, oh, okay, well, not today, it was like, okay, to him that meant not ever,
Yeah.
and following up. And so this young lady, she follows up with me, and I gave her resume to our head of engineering, and she graduated about 5 months later, came in for an internship. She's still here today, 3 years later, loves it. Just got their first win last week, and as a
Nice.
female lead engineer, which is so cool. And then it's, made space for more female engineers to come on staff, too, downstairs. So yeah, you just you gotta take that opportunity to do those kinds of things.
Yes. Yes. All right, we went so far off track from our questions. I'm
Well,
gonna bring us back.
that's what we said we would do.
Yes, I love it. I love it. These are great conversations. I can't think of a clever segue to bring us back, so I'm just gonna say we went off track. We're coming back. But
Happens sometimes.
I know, I know. We did talk a lot about, what is valuable to sponsors. And one of the things that I notice when racers are just learning to build the partnerships is that they think that winning is what sponsors want and partners pay for. Was there ever a time that your team's on-track performance wasn't quite where you wanted it, but you still had to lean on something other than that winning to provide value to your sponsors?
Yeah, I mean, in NASCAR, your seasons of winning ebb and flow. Kind of going back to what you said at the beginning, you've got to have that full package so that when one area isn't as strong as you want it to be, there's, other areas that can weigh in and kind of hold you up. Last season we won 17 races. The season before that, like 7. 2010, we went into to our season unsponsored, all kinds of mess going on. We had ended up with like 20 drivers that season for some reason. It just nothing was working out and making sense. So yeah, there's those seasons, but usually when you have made a solid relationship with somebody, you're able to talk about those things, and obviously have this. Probably is not as true for the grassroots and those getting started and those kind of in this area versus us being in a professional motorsports arena. We have, a bigger advantage to be able to lean back on the marketing side of it and our fan base and making those connections with consumers. But it does happen, but that's where the relationship part of it is so important, and having well-rounded, like you talked about, in terms of being able to show them something more. But winning is very important. I think winning is very important ultimately, especially as you grow in the ranks of whatever that racing discipline is.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you have your drivers, are they involved in any of the marketing or the business side
Yeah.
of it, or
Yeah,
are
absolutely.
they okay, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. We ask a lot of them, right? So we contract a lot of deliverables for them to participate in. And we've taken an approach too in the last several years of what we just really call Team JRM. So instead of, especially in our series, we're a stepping stone, right? So we are lucky when the new drivers come in and race for us at least 2 years. A lot of times it's 1 year. Like we had Connor
Mm.
Zilich last year. He already moved up into the Cup Series. you can't marry up a sponsor with Connor, then only for him to leave, a year later and then go, oh, okay,
Yeah,
who's
that's
going to fill
true.
those shoes, and talk the sponsor into something else and all of that. So we've taken kind of a team JRM approach where we utilize all the drivers in relationships. So we have relationships with Roto-Rooter. We have relationships this year with Arby's, Wild Chips, and we're using all of our
Mm,
drivers. And a really good example of this is that Carson Quapple, who drives the number one Bass Pro Car for us, was scheduled to be in an Arby's commercial with Dale and do some Arby's work. And he got like the deathly sick right now, the flu, the whatever was going around. And because that sponsor was across two other teams, we were able to pull Justin Allgaier in, who then stepped in for Carson, did the whole commercial and all that kind of stuff. So we weren't, pigeonholed there to
mm.
do that. But yeah, we ask a lot of them, but it's important, and they know it's important. They know, everybody wants to say, I just want to be a race car driver. I just want to drive the race cars. Well, guess what? It's not that simple. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
work that goes on with all of these partners. So I wish it was that easy. But you have to grow people into that too, because they don't, not every driver comes to you with the qualities to partner and know. I mean, think about Wyatt, Amanda, when he first came in, and y'all don't know him from even before that, but the shyest kid on earth, and he has really come out of his shell, but it takes a
Yes.
lot of work, to do that and to be comfortable around people and, that kind of thing. So
I love seeing that too at the
now sometimes it
track.
goes too far. I'm like, boy, reel you back in.
Reel 'em in.
Yeah, that's so precious. But yeah, so the way how we run our drag racing team is we do rental drivers. So my sister and I will step into the seat sometime, but we both haven't been full time since 2020. But since the early 2000s, my dad has always had a second car and rented that one out because that will then pay, for him to go racing. And so we really kind of grew that side of the racing business. And we charge the drivers to rent out the car and the team and stuff. And so they're in charge of finding their own sponsors. And if they need to do deliverables, if we need to bring the car to do a display, well, that's an added expense. Sometimes it is, hey, it's generational, it's mom and dad's money. So those types of drivers are the ones that have the least amount of success on the track. You could tell that they're just doing it because they're bored. They don't have as much passion to race and to drive. They just, they see this shiny object of like, oh, I want to be on TV. I want to become famous. And they don't put in the actual work to become a good driver. They don't understand the marketing side. And then when they want to go and step up to Top Fuel or to one of the other pro classes, they don't have that marketing side of it. And then the other teams are like, oh, well, you have no personality, or you have no content on social media, like you're not brandable, so we don't want you to drive for our team. And
Mhm.
we've kind of seen that happen. So like for me, I try to shape them a little bit and try to encourage them and like, hey, like you should do this. I'm not their boss, so I can't tell them what to do, but just trying to help mold them into being that, that brandable driver that companies and then the bigger teams would want to work with to then represent their name and their partners too.
Yeah. And if they're interested in going further, surely they take you up on the support and the advice and try to implement things and do things, right? That's the goal. That's the
Yeah.
hope and goal.
Yeah, so. But yeah, yeah, sometimes they're just with us for a year.
Doesn't always work out that
Um,
way.
but yeah, sometimes it's a couple years. So, but yeah, we're also kind of that stepping stone for them too.
Yeah.
So,
It's
yeah.
really interesting. I mean, all I really know on a professional motorsports level is off-road, right? That's the only one that I've ever really been involved at a professional level, and it's really interesting to hear from both of you ladies, about drag racing. You've got, rental vehicles. People are paying to get into a race car, and then for you, Kelly, like you've got drivers that are on your team that's kind of the opposite, right? Like you're bringing in talent to drive your vehicles, and it's curious to think about like what motorsports follow which models for that and
Mhm.
why?
Yeah. I mean, I think, part of it probably just has to do with the financial picture of the motorsports. Like, I mean, it's imperative that at the level between the Truck Series or the Xfinity and O'Reilly Series now and the Cup Series that starts with partners, and then that you can bring in talent. We're sort of shifting back to that because there was a period of time where, I call it pay to play, right?
Yeah.
Talking about the rental cars. And, we've definitely had either people that have relationships with partners that bring their money, partnership, everything to the table, but we still operate that in the same way that we do if the partner's ours, because ultimately it's extremely important that the brand of junior motorsports is consistent and replicated, and that we're, doing. And we found that if we just keep that consistency, no matter who's bringing the money to the table, to your point, Megan, you're teaching them later for when they grow, right? And if they have funds to be able to take elsewhere as they grow in their career, then that will serve them well, kind of doing it that way here. But we have it work both ways, but we kind of keep the same model. And the sponsors won't, a great example is like Brant and Justin Allgaier. They've been partnered together for 15, 16 years. But the same way that they worked at other places works here. There's a certain amount of deliverables that Brent wants, and we just kind of, it's understood by everybody that the team executes all of those kinds of things, right? So even though the relationship is with Justin and Brant, we've done a good job of executing it all the way. And, now we're probably in a position that once Justin retires, Brant would probably stay with Junior Motorsports, want to bring in new talent, which is also a great place to be, instead of wanting to take their driver and money elsewhere,
Mm-hmm.
But it's very different. I've learned a lot in the off-road world and I probably don't know 20% of it, just between looking at, I think it's been real interesting, this past year, listening to different conversations about the growth. And like, I don't know Champ Off-Road Racing like some know it from when it was the Lucas Oil Series or all of that. I look back and I look at the names of who were champions, then and think, okay, what happened for then it to kind of have more of a regional feel like how it is now up in, your world, Amanda, in Wisconsin and so on and so forth. And then thinking through the group that has it now and us going out to Glen Helen,
Yeah.
and what does that look like for that balance between being kind of regional and local, but then bringing more eyeballs so that then it can turn into more sponsorship and partners and a bigger form of racing and so on and so forth, but yet not undermine what the grassroots people are doing and the people that have been supporting the series. Like it's a complex, it's a lot to think through and complications
It
of
is.
what all that looks like. And we have that on our side too, but the difference is going to a new racetrack or not. Like, my antennas go up whenever NASCAR says, oh, we're going to go to the West Coast for like 3 weekends in a row. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, we go out there and we spend $22,000 in fuel to go to, it costs my 4 cars to go to Portland, Oregon, where, I have the chance to win an average of $20,000. It doesn't even make sense, and you're
Yes.
like, hey, what are we doing?
Yeah.
So I get it, I get those kind of conversations and questions, in terms of, we started this conversation, why does it look so different everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And those are the differences, right? In short course, I feel it's very regional based, and we're all out there trying to attract something that's more national or
Yeah.
something that's bigger than where we are, right? So,
Yes.
yeah.
It's definitely a dress for the job you want, not the job you have moment.
Yeah, yeah. I've told you several times and tell people about short course racing. It's just so fun and festival because it's not as high intensity, rigid,
Yeah.
as the NASCAR world in terms of the delivering and everything. You can have fun. It's like NASCAR used to be back when I remember my dad starting and that Saturday night group of guys coming over and working on the car after their day jobs and all of that kind of stuff. It's just more of a real job now.
Yes.
And short course isn't that way.
Chris and I have had a lot of conversations too about, well, if we ran the race series.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's hard because it's, I think that's one of the things that in my role, even leading my people here or just, trying to convey to fans all the different dynamics that are involved in making the decision, right?
Yes.
Because you want to think big to grow, but you've got to take care of the core and what's happening. But, if you only think about the core, you're going to just stay what you are.
Mhm.
But you want to grow at the right pace and speed and everything too. You just can't make crazy decisions that put the core of the group that is supportive of the series, in a bad position, so that you don't have the support and all that that we have right now in the short course stuff. So
Yeah.
it's amazing to me too, like the youth and everybody that make up so much of our
Yeah.
weekend, and what they're
Yes.
doing, right?
We were chatting with Marty Fiolka at the Mint. We ran into him. Of course, he's like the first person we run into. And it's like, oh, I know you from Wisconsin. So, but, we were talking, at first we were talking about the Beatles coming to Crandon and Bark River and stuff this year. But then we got talking about, how we still have this really regional feel for our
Uh-huh.
sport. And we have this huge grassroots sportsman racer population. And frankly, even a lot of our pros are still sportsman ish.
Yeah,
I'm going to put that in
yeah,
quotes, right? Like they
yeah,
don't have the funds to go out to these races in California. We barely have funds to go
yeah,
out to California. And I would argue we're probably one of the better funded teams in our sport. Which is really kind of sad, that we don't have that kind of support in our sport being as awesome as it is. But that
no,
being said, we're talking about, exactly what you were just saying. Like, how do you maintain that core? How do you maintain the sportsman racers in at least the fashion that they're in right now, but elevate the pros and get more to a national feel? And I am not saying this with any kind of I know what's coming at all, but I suspect that the future holds a separation for us. We're probably going to see a regional and a national split, which I honestly think our sport needs in order to elevate the true professionals and give them that platform to truly travel across the US, provide that value to more eyeballs and get more
yeah,
sponsors on board because of that. But I think you're right. If we continue to just look at the core of our population and continue to do the same things, we're really not going to see the growth we need.
yeah, and I think a lot of different motorsports go through that process, and it's just a matter of attracting. You think about drag racing, Megan. I mean, you can probably speak to this. I know enough to be dangerous, but you have the different the IHRA, the NHRA, you have different kind of local drag racing situations that the kids and can do the junior dragsters and all that kind of stuff, then into the professional.
Mhm.
You've got to have those layers, I guess, is the best way to put it, right?
Mhm.
Something to
Yeah.
aspire to. People in your group aspires to be NHRA champions, right?
Mhm. Yeah, well, that's
So
exactly how I grew up. We did junior dragsters. I started when I was 10. We just race at our local track here in Kansas City. And then, yeah, yeah, like climbed the ladder, went up the ranks, moved up through the sportsman classes. And then, when I was a kid, I did have aspirations to go to Top Fuel because, that's the pinnacle. That's what everyone wants to do. And then when I got into Top Alcohol Dragster, which is what my dad was running, I was like, I'm very satisfied and content with this. Like I loved racing with my dad, and I've actually never driven for another team. So I was like, I don't know if I would even like being on someone else's team. So I did Top Alcohol Dragster for 5 years, and then I just got kind of burnt out with everything we were doing with it. And that was also the same time I was getting married. So it's like, okay, it was a good time for me to step away. But yeah, and whenever we are looking for drivers for our team, we want someone that has that prior sportsman experience. No matter what class it was, we don't want someone that is completely green. Just because they might have the funding doesn't mean you're going to be a good driver. So we
Mhm.
definitely prefer someone that has, at least 2 years of experience driving something slower. And with drag racing, you can go and take your daily driver down the track on a Friday night test and tune. That's what makes it
Yeah.
so great.
Yeah,
So
that's true. Yeah.
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 Yeah, that's true. That's I didn't think about that point. The same thing in short course, with the sportsman division, like the trucks that are on the sportsman side versus the pro side. There's that avenue to do it that way before
Mhm.
you grow into the pro side and whatnot. Yeah. The other hard part I think that, and I think about this with Wyatt, because you said the words burnout, that, I think that's something that we all have to be careful of when we're talking to the grassroots racer and the kids that are coming up through, like these sportsman kids that are at our events, that their parents, you got to find that thing that, and this is the one thing that I hate about racing in general, motorsports in general. There's no teams that our kids can go play for and rec ball and rec, there's no rec motorsports, right? And so it's really hard for kids to get involved. And when they do get involved, there's financials that need to be part of it, right? To make it
Yeah.
happen. But at the same point, we can, you know, do we get our kids involved in something? I mean, Wyatt, bless his heart, at 14, the things that we have him doing and being part
Yeah.
of. And some days he just looks at us and goes, I just want to be a kid.
Yes.
He's going to school. He's coming here this afternoon to shoot some content and do some stuff. Then we have to go to the dentist later because he's got to get his wisdom teeth out.
Oof.
you know, you think about all these things that they're doing. He just raced 4 nights in a row last week, late model stock cars, and doing content during the day and doing different things. And, what are we setting them up for? Are we setting them
Mhm.
up to love the sport? Or are we setting them up to like get burned out quickly and all of those kinds of things at their age, So
Yes.
I'm a let them be kids supporter, as well, but that's the hard part about our sport. I think NASCAR has looked really hard at what that youth movement looks like. It usually starts in quarter midgets for us. And then what's the progression look like, because there's age restrictions and all that. And there should be age restrictions, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
that to me is a little bit of the downfall, even for us marketing wise. You think about fans want to, this influencing world. For me to influence you, I've got to be looked at as respected. Have I what's my experience level been with a particular product or something another? My 14-year-old can't get up there and pitch certain products, right? Because he's
Yeah.
never even heard of them, used them, don't know what they do, any of that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And so, that happens in our series too in NASCAR. We have 18, 19-year-old kids running our cars, and our audience is out there that are 30, 40, 50 going, what's this kid know about, blah, 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 you know?
Right.
And you're like, well, I don't know. What does he know about that?
Yeah.
And I think that's been hard marketing wise, to also make that connection back to consumers and communities and that kind of thing.
I love that you talked about, letting the kids just be kids. And honestly, Kelley, that's one of the things that I noticed first about your family when you guys entered our sport was watching Wyatt just run around with all the kids. And, I love
That's his
that.
favorite part.
I can tell. But I think that also gives him the opportunity to build his own brand too,
Mhm.
because, if you're just always living in the shadow of what your parents want you to do in a motorsport, then you're not living your own brand, you're living your parents' brand. And,
Yeah.
I see Wyatt ride by on a bike with a fishing pole in hand because he's going back to the pond to go fishing. That is authentically Wyatt's brand. And so when I see
Yes.
him out there representing, Bass Pro, it's like, well, yeah, of course he is. That's
Yeah,
what
that
he
makes
loves.
sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I think that makes I think you're right that, forced marketing into like a brand that doesn't fit. You're not going to have a 14-year-old representing your whiskey bar,
Yeah.
but
Right?
but when you do have a 14-year-old that's allowed to be himself and love the things he loves and then match him up with a brand that really fits, that's really good marketing fit. And I think that makes it a lot easier too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we certainly got lucky in that situation, to be able to have Bass Pro be a part of his racing relationships. And they've been, just a part of our family for a long time. But, I thought it was really cool. I don't know if you guys have seen the most recent Roto-Rooter commercial, that's been on social, but, how fun can it be to market, needing to plunge your toilet, right? But, they have taken the stance that they support some grassroots racers, and, Cade Wolf, his dad is a, crew chief, here in NASCAR. Kyle and Audrey Larson, Kyle Larson's kids. Isabella Robusto, who's a young lady running the ARCA series under the Toyota camp. Teen 20, 21-year-old girl. And then they have Kyle Larson. They do some stuff here in our program with and utilize Dale and Carson Quapple and some others, Connor Zilich. But they did this commercial. It was so fun because the kids got to do their part. Like Owen Larson comes out and he's like, I think the toilet's clogged. And, then all the adults kind of chime in and get it fixed or right, whatever. So, you can find those opportunities that make sense and just be really creative with what
Mhm.
that looks like,
Yeah.
and when you do get those opportunities, they're really fun, and I think
Yes.
that's,
Mhm.
that's kind of going back to the marketing and how you get out to find sponsors and all. And I've heard y'all talk about this, you can't just send out a deck and go, here, I need $5,000 and I'm going to go to 10 races and da 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 da, right? You got to find out what they want. What do they need? What are they looking for? And then also pre-think about what you can do for them, not just paint on the car. How can I fit into their brand or whatever? What can I introduce them to, or what is about me that connects with that brand or that kind of thing too, and thinking that way. So.
Yeah, and oftentimes it's not what you expect.
Uh-uh.
I've been running an Instagram challenge for myself where I'm reviewing a racer's Instagram profile from the
Uh-huh.
viewpoint
Yeah,
of
I've
a
seen that.
sponsor. And I had one of the people that I reviewed reached out and they said, hey, we're competing in this series and this brand reached out to us and I really want to do this right. I don't know what to say from here. And I said, well, ask them what they want. Ask them why they reached out. Ask them what
Yeah.
success looks like if you do partner with them. I'm like, it's either going to be like, oh, that's what they want. This will be easy, or this is not aligned with us. It's not something we can actually deliver. And they reached back out after they had asked the brand what they actually wanted. And they said, I'm so glad that you gave us those questions to ask because they actually just thought that we came across really authentic on our social media and they didn't want something well polished or
Yeah.
anything. They just
And
wanted
perfect, right.
what we were already doing. It's like,
Yeah.
well, great. That sounds like a great fit. But can you imagine if you
Yeah.
were to turn around and change everything that you were doing and high production? And that's just not even what they wanted, you
Yeah,
know?
for sure.
Well, and Kelly, I loved in your book kind of going back to like with Wyatt and putting your mom hat on. I loved how you made it very clear that like family comes first in your book, and I really appreciate that because like I was telling Amanda, like I can really relate to your story because when I was growing up, racing was always first with my dad, and he was never home. And so we don't really have that close of a relationship. And when I had my son, my husband and I were like, we want to make sure family comes first for us. And everyone always asks, like, he's only 4.5. And you can get a junior dragster when you're 5. And so everyone's always like, oh, does grandpa got a junior ready for him? And it's like, we could do that. We could kind of force it, like what we were talking about, but we want it to be his decision. And, my husband races dirt bikes. So whether he wants to do 2 wheels or 4 wheels or drag racing or dirt racing or something completely different, like we just want him to come to us when he's ready. And, whatever sport he wants to do, we're not going to
Yeah.
force him to do what we do or force him how I was raised to do. And I do want to like really show you that I appreciate that for me being a new mom to hear that from you. Um
Yeah, it's important. I mean, Wyatt, we didn't, well, my husband and I both know, just how hard the sport is, especially in our stock car world, to make it and to the finances it takes to get there and all of those kinds of things. And, everybody asked us when Wyatt was growing up, why, when's he going to race? When's he going to race? When's he going to race? And my husband would always say, not till he shoots his first buck. And, we're going to make that
uh
more important.
yeah, I
And
love that. My husband's a big hunter too.
literally, Wyatt went to watch his sister's race when he was 2, 3 years old and whatnot, 4, and, um, he got to be 8 years old, and they were going out to a friend in Illinois to work on deer stands in the middle of July to get ready for hunting season. And he had an extra outlaw cart, and they were racing at their local track. And so he's like, "Why don't you let Wyatt do this?" And so we asked Wyatt, and he's like, "Sure." Well, I didn't even go. And so they raced, and Wyatt finished second or third and loved it, had a ball. And
Yeah.
so there it was from then on out, but to your point, let it be their idea, or it just was happenstance that's the way it happened. And we didn't have to go buy all the stuff ourselves first and da 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 da. That's another thing, is like, if your kid's interested in it, it sounds like a lot of money. We had this conversation with a late model driver and dad of ours at one point. They thought that they needed to invest in everything themselves instead of coming
Mhm.
to drive for us. And yeah, did it sound pricey at the time for them to come drive for us? Absolutely it did. But the dad told me after it was all said and done, "I wish we would have listened to you, because I spent all this money. Let's say I spent $200,000 to get myself outfitted with the late model stock car and do all the things, and I sold it for pennies on the dollar,
Mhm.
and and they were trying to do it themselves. And here at our team, there's a lot of support around you. There's a lot of eyeballs. There's a lot of things like that. I think that's something that Ryan's trying to build. And I think you guys are doing a great job of it too. Amanda is, just that brand presence of, who you are and what you're about, and to attract people to you, that can work for them a whole lot better than them doing their own thing, you know
Yeah.
to help them grow as a marketer and driver and all of those things. And yeah, it may sound like you talked about renting, your drag car. It does sound like a lot of money. I get it. But when you think about what it takes to move through the sport, sometimes paying that up front works better for you in the long run. A lot of our late model drivers here have went on to be, NASCAR racers. So,
Mhm.
and they maybe have not went through my program. They may have just started in the late model stock part, but then went elsewhere for the other stuff.
And you're getting more than equipment, like, you're
Yeah.
getting
Yeah,
that
you're getting that
hands-on
brand support.
experience
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
guidance
Absolutely.
too, yeah.
Yeah,
One
for
of the
sure.
Mhm.
things, kind of just talking about, like, getting kids in the sport and their own brand and all that stuff, and Kelley, I saw something pop up yesterday on social media. Chris showed it to me, and he was just kinda laughing. He's like, "God, I love this," but, there was some headline that said, like, Dale Earnhardt's grandson is something with a monster truck, and then it highlighted your comment that said his name is
Yeah.
Wyatt Miller, right? And
Yeah.
how hard is it sometimes to get out from the shadow
Oh,
of that
it's terrible.
legacy?
Terrible. It's hard. That's why I remind them, that and I get it. It opens doors and all those things. That reporter wrote back and was like, this is good for my business too. And I get that. I was just like, just use both, use
Yes.
the descriptor, but yeah, tell everybody his name at the same time.
Yes.
And because, you feel like it's just being used, so to speak, or whatever. But it is hard to stand out from the shadows. I think that's why we love the dirt racing. We love the trucks so much. We love the off-road trucks so much. We love the sprint cars and all that we do, because there isn't that, of course, yes, he's still Dale Earnhardt's grandson and still in the Earnhardt family, but none of that reputation comes to the off-road truck, because we don't off-road truck race, right? This is the
Yeah.
first we do sprint car race. And so he's just Wyatt there, learning. Does he have a pedigree behind him that should showcase some talent and whatnot? Absolutely. But he can just be Wyatt there. And it's this past week when we ran late model stocks, everything, and I've kind of always marched to the beat of my own drum, but I haven't had to be a race car driver and follow up in the shadow of my dad either. But I think about Dale Jr. and just thinking about all the people, what I would hear about Wyatt this past week, and the expectations of people, either the love him or hate him attitude because of who he's associated with, is it just gets so hard and so frustrating to deal with in our world, because they won't let him just be him, you know
Mhm.
it's like, "Oh, you're gonna be just like your grandpa," or, "Oh, you're gonna be just like this," or, "Oh, you're gonna suck just like your uncle." Like, whatever they say, it's just like, "Can you just let him be?"
Yes. Yeah. And I mean,
Yeah,
clearly he is talented in his own right. He is
yeah,
building his own name. We're so
and he'll figure
excited.
out the part of it that he loves. He if you ask him, it's the off-road trucks and the sprint car worlds right now. But I think that's part of it. I think that he can just be Wyatt there, and
Yeah.
I think that's part of what he likes about it too.
Yes. It reminds me,
Yeah.
Megan, of the time that you shared the thing where I don't even remember where it was posted, but it was like basically saying like this female drag racer, and you were like, "What do you think about this?" Right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
so there
horse
was,
riding.
like, a journalist that was at one of the races I was doing, and he recorded me racing, and in his caption, it said, like, "Female drag racer," like, "I won this round," or whatever, and so I
Yeah,
reposted it, and I was like, "What do you" like, I was asking the fans, like, "What do you guys think?" Like, how he called me just, like, female drag racer instead of, like, just
yeah,
drag racer or just
yeah,
Megan,
yeah,
and so, yeah, there's a lot of controversy in the
yeah. Because they
comments
don't
there.
say male
Yes.
drag racer,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Same thing on the NASCAR side, and obviously, us being females in a man's world sport kinda thing, you get asked that often, right? Like, how do you stand out? How do you do this? And you just wanna be treated as you just want the same. Like you said, if you're gonna say male drag racer, say female drag racer. If you're not gonna use male drag racer, then don't use female drag racer, like, whatever,
Yes.
like, just be consistent. Like,
Mhm.
it's a tough road because there are areas where you wanna stand out as the female, but, you I just don't want it to be all about that, right?
Yeah, it's a tough line to
It's
walk.
tough. Yeah, it
I
is,
will
it
say
is.
too, talking about how Wyatt can just be Wyatt in off-road, I honestly being, I don't know, somewhat visible in our sport, I don't think I've ever felt like I wasn't welcomed as a woman and an authority in
Uh-uh.
our sport, and I think that's something I probably take for granted more often than not, but it's something I really do appreciate about off-road too.
Yeah, I think you see, when I come to the off-road world, I think that family and I don't wanna say family is in your necessarily related everybody family, but the space is welcoming from the standpoint that even your workers that are guys on your team, their wives come, you
Yeah,
know? And so you've got all of that happening to where you see male and female and you see all the support and whatever roles everybody is carrying. It just is more welcoming, I think, because of that,
yeah,
um, in our sport, in the garage, the families, the spouses, all that, they're not hanging around, right? You just see pretty much a drove of men, except on my team where I have 3 women, yes. And I'm proud of that, like saying that about my female racers because they're earning that right to stand right up beside the guys,
yes.
and that's super exciting. So, but yeah, I think that you see that in the short course. You just see everybody working together, doing things together, supporting together, all of that kind of thing. You get to visibly see it, which makes it way more welcoming for everybody, even newcomers that came in. So,
So, Kelly, you have been really passionate about connecting with fans and with your background on the merchandise side, which in your book, you talk a lot about that a lot, which I love. So, what have you seen work best when it comes to engaging with the fans and the consumers? And how could grassroots racers kind of take from that, but on, a much smaller budget that they have?
well, I don't know if I have a great answer for it. One of the things that I have seen on the short course side is like the little freebies that you can invest in, working on that brand recognition with people, if I have a penny for everybody that comes up and asks me for a decal, at the short course races, I'd be rich. And so, just finding those little ways to do something like that, where you can that brand building. I mean, the merch is you gotta have a customer for the merchandise. So, I mean, just because you make merchandise doesn't mean
Mm,
that, you're gonna sell it and it's gonna get out there and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
you gotta have a demand for it. But, kinda, you can just start in those areas. You come over to you guys and you've got the bracelets. You got the one I love the most is the Wild Bill, with the orange
Yeah.
headbands, you see, but that
Chinese
works,
stuff.
the glasses, they got the glasses. One of our racers, Megan, is their colors are orange and blue, and he's in the Pro 4s, and but and they have those crazy orange hair things and all, and they just give that stuff away left and right at
Yeah.
his tent, and before you know it, you're walking to the stands and there's a sea of these people, and
Yes.
they the people wear it and love it because it's fun stuff, they don't know who he is necessarily, but they learn, right? So some fun things like that too, I think is fun. Or, like you guys, you see the purple and aqua a lot and that kind of thing, just kind of that branding part of it that kind of makes you something that stands out, for yourself. The nickname, paint schemes, that kind of thing.
I'm so excited because we haven't been home for almost a month, but I know that I have 4 boxes from Nexon sitting on my front porch right now, and they sent us, like Bam Bam sticks, like the inflatable,
Huh? Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
noisy things.
Yeah, yep.
Yes, they sent us. I don't know how many cases. They had like 12 cases of them. So we're gonna have like a whole crowd of just people with purple Nexon
That's
tire Bam Bam
perfect.
sticks.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
somebody else had the flags, like the American flags.
Oh, I think that was Gibbs,
Yeah,
right?
Yes.
Trey Gibbs, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep, we've
And,
got one of
yeah, so,
those.
you find something like that that kind of, sticks for you that kinda represents you, and most everybody wants something free, so
Yes, I think this year, so the Impulse Media guys, they came up with "When Chris wins, we all win." That's like kind of our new
yeah.
tagline over the last year and a half or so. But and it's all because they came up after Chris won a race and we gave them an air freshener with Chris's truck on it. And they were like, "Oh, is this because you won?" And Chris is like, "Yeah, sure." We had been handing them out all weekend. So
Sure, sure.
but this year, I really want to lean into the "When Chris wins, we all win." So I've got ideas for like kind of small batch little freebies that when Chris wins a race, we'll give away little
Oh, that'd be fun.
freebies.
Yeah.
So I have so many ideas, but
Yeah, that's awesome. We love doing, like, the parade at Crandon where you can just
Oh,
go up to
yes.
everybody's car, everybody's table, and get all the free stuff. Yeah, we loved that.
yes,
The
the parade
Crandon
is,
Parade. Crandon's super fun, super fun.
it's funny going to the Mint and being there for Fremont Street and seeing the scale of that and like the Crandon parade is bigger, I think, than Fremont Street
Yeah?
was.
Wow.
And I mean, like, there were people
Interesting.
there. The infrastructure was far larger, obviously. We're downtown in Las Vegas. But when I look at the scale of like the vendors there and the race cars were going through tech, but they weren't really just like sitting there talking to people and making those
Mm,
connections with people the same way you
mhm.
can do at Crandon. And we're really lucky that we have
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Super lucky. Maybe try to replicate that at some of the other events
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
community would be fun.
And I think they've tried it, at
Yeah.
Anago and
Alina, did we do something with Lena, I think?
yeah, yep.
Yeah.
But they're not really, I don't know, like in Vegas, you're pulling people that are like, what the heck is going on over there?
Yeah.
Because they exist there
Yeah.
already.
Yeah.
But
Passerbys. Yeah.
yeah, I think, Dirt City has the opportunity to pull in more people from Green Bay and Appleton and stuff. There's significant opportunity to be had there, but we just don't have the population in a lot of the places where we're racing.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Now we got to get used to calling Antigo something else.
Yeah,
Did you see
yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I mean, I heard through the grapevine, I didn't see any of the public stuff, what was going on, but I heard that Zach's gonna be kinda running stuff. Yeah. But, Megan, you briefly kinda touched on Kelly's book, Drive, which was an awesome listen. I loved it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You did talk about your work in the merchandising space with NASCAR and kind of how that led into, you getting your feet wet in the business side in the NASCAR world. And I know that merch is still a big part of the JR Motorsports strategy. What role do you see merch playing in a racer's program, and how can they use that to build stronger connections with fans?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just starting off, you got to have a demand for it, right? So I think that that's important. I would never want to lead anyone down the path to think that, just make some t-shirts and hats and, all your problems are solved, because it's not that simple for sure. It's that dreaded word of inventory, inventory, inventory.
Yes.
I think it's important as part of your brand building to do it. and figure out, kind of what the landscape is in your own world for it. I've been trying to figure that out on the off-road stuff, of what the demand is, what kind of mix do you need to have in shirts? Can you just bring one shirt, have it all year long? Or, a lot of people have success. I see this a lot in the sprint car world, the dirt car world, high limits and World of Outlaws and stuff is like, they do short runs, and it's always like a new shirt pops up every 6 or 8 weeks, in that world
Yeah.
for a driver and small quantities kind of thing, So, just kind of trying to figure out what works from that perspective. I mean, when I started in the merchandise business for NASCAR, we were, I mean, it was a huge business. I mean, my dad alone, you know, sold 40, 50, 60 million dollars worth of stuff, in a year. And it's certainly nothing like that anymore these days. I mean, in my opinion, in my world, I mean, consumers want it, right? I think, from a grassroots standpoint, you just kind of got to figure out what the audience is, what the demand looks like, where can you sell it? It's obviously a lot easier ways to sell now through Shopify and different places like that that make it more convenient, to be able to do your own store and web store and things like that. But, it's a good part of the brand building piece of it.
Yeah. When we launched Racer on Demand, which I don't know how familiar you are with it, Kelly, but we do on-demand printing for
Yeah, yeah,
Racers merch.
yep,
So when we launched that, I had this idea and I was just trying to validate, what is the disconnect here? What problem am I really trying to solve? And so I reached out to Racers and I asked them, like what problems do you have with merch? What is your struggle here? And almost every single one that I talked to, probably every single one that I talked to said, well, I buy a bunch of stuff and it doesn't sell, or I have
yeah,
to tote it around, or, it
yep,
becomes outdated. And then I talked to fans, and 65% of the fans that I talked to, their number one reason for buying merch was because they wanted to financially support the racer.
yep.
And racers, almost all of them were in deficit when they were selling merch. And I was like,
Mhm.
this has got to
Yeah, this
stop.
is not making sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the problem we got to solve here. So, I just saw how passionate fans were about really wanting to put money into racers' pockets, and merch was a drain for
Yeah,
racers, but
which
fans were demanding it. So, that's a big part of the reason why we leaned in where we did with the merch side. Obviously, my passion is on the sponsorship and marketing side, but I just saw such a huge opportunity there to give racers an option to do it for free.
yeah, yeah. We do the print on demand for our podcast group. So my brothers, Dale Jr. Down Low, Bless Your Heart, Door Bumper Clear, Actions Detrimental that Denny Hamlin does a lot of those.
Yeah.
Same thing. People are always asking for the merch. Is it one person, 10 people, or 100? It just depends. And so we do the print on demand. It's done really well. And the other thing too is like that. Instead of just concentrating on where and I'm learning too, like the difference in what the off-road truck merch looks like than what we're used to in NASCAR and the art designs and what people like. A lot of people come up in the off-road world, they want things that kind of look like the team. They
Mhm.
want to kind of look like the team. They don't want like a splashy graphic and that kind of thing. And but the other thing, and we do this a lot with the podcast parts, and I think racers can do this too, is find those like catchy slogans that, you know, not just all about your name and the car or whatever, but things that they say through the podcast and all, they'll just do a quick, you know, design, and then that's the print on demand thing, and if you sell five of
Yeah.
them, great. Sell 10 of them, great. Sell 100 of them, but those quick witty sayings, because everybody kind of likes the lifestyle piece, right? You want
Yes.
to wear something, everybody's different. Some people like really, bold and gaudy things. Some people like really simple and toned down, so you kind of got to find that vibe. And what you're doing there, speaks to that really well, to where they can do it without that bad 9-letter word, inventory.
Yes.
8-letter word, 8-letter word. But I don't know how many ever
Yeah.
letters it is.
I don't know.
I think it's 9.
We're gonna be counting on our fingers here
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah. That'll be our next shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
9-letter
Yeah.
word.
Yeah. Well, okay, so Kelly, I do wanna kind of circle back because in the beginning, we talked about, like, the, social media and online presence. So, from merch and, trying to sell those online, is there anything else that you've seen your drivers do that have really connected with fans and the sponsors online, like, when it comes to content and social media and all that?
I think, a lot of it sounds just kind of simple, but I mean, you know, and I'm gonna say this and then I'm gonna go, but. So I'm sitting here thinking, be approachable, be authentic, have a personality, but don't be boring, you know? But
Yeah.
if that's your authentic person,
Yeah.
if that's who you are, then that's hard, right? But you gotta have a personality, and you gotta, you just got to be able to show people who you are and what you're about, and do that in the most authentic, way that makes you comfortable. There's still ways that more shy people can show their personality than if you're not outgoing or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think, in our world, there's so much that's expected, required, a part of the program that we have people all behind the scenes working on. I mean, I have, our social media and digital group is 4 people strong, and that's all they're doing all day is planning, planning content. Um, when I think about it from, if I can put myself like in the shoes of doing it for Wyatt, it's tough. All the last several years I've been the social media person, and had help here or there freelancing, but it's difficult, and you miss that scheduling, you miss that consistency, all of those kinds of things that are important, to especially in the algorithms of social media and all those kinds of things. So there's just, there's a lot to it. In everything that I do, I try to just start small. And I think that's a really good piece of advice to the people that you guys are trying to help, is like, make small goals, you know, do something that then just becomes part of your everyday. And when that becomes part of your everyday, then add another something small. I'm through the craze of eating right and doing all the skincare thing and the organic this and the that, I was like so overwhelmed because it's like, oh, we just got to stop doing everything. Well, everything is going to kill us. Everything's going to make us die. And it's like, just take one thing and change it. And then after you've done that, it sort of becomes a habit. And then take one more thing and change it, and then you have another habit. And so I
Mhm.
think that's really relevant to the group that you guys are trying to do, is like, it's overwhelming, it's big, and so kind of rank things and do like a pros and cons thing, and kind of find that thing that stands out and start there, and then try to start biting off and tackling more things as they sort of become habits and sort of part of just become what you do every day, because it can get extremely overwhelming. I was doing that last year with merch and all that stuff. It's like, you know, does it make sense that you sell 10 of something versus 100 of something? That, why do I need to carry this product around just so that I can sell 10 all year, to make 20
Yes.
bucks, at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah. No, I love what you're talking about, though, with picking out like the most important thing or the thing that's going to make an impact and just going for that one thing instead of trying to fix everything. And I constantly have to tell myself this because I'm a perfectionist, but I have this little voice in my head that repeatedly says, progress, not perfection, Amanda.
Mm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
sure.
And I think
Yeah,
it really comes into play there.
it does. I have a lot of self talks the same way.
Yes. So, we've talked a lot in a bunch of different ways about providing value and what sponsors are looking for, how we can provide value for sponsors. But, from your experience, what do sponsors really care about? And what's one of those things that racers maybe misunderstand or misinterpret about getting or keeping their sponsors?
That's a good one. We talked a little bit about what do sponsors really want. I think it's important for you to know that. I think that's a good question for you to ask before they become your sponsor. What are their goals and what are they looking for? I think within anything, I don't know that I could pinpoint something that what do sponsors really want and where people make mistakes. I think the mistakes are made in not knowing what they want. The mistakes are made in not communicating after you've gotten the sponsors. Um, following up, checking in, sending reports, sending whatever you can do, sending recaps, keeping them engaged, I think is important. And, following up and keeping that relationship going back and forth. It's never good when you don't communicate back and forth, and then all of a sudden the contract's up and you're like, "Hey, you ready to give me some money again?" And they're like, "I hadn't heard from you since about this time last year."
Who are you again?
Yes.
You know what?
Yeah.
And that communication's got to flow back and forth in the good and the bad, right? You think about social media and I always struggled sometimes with like putting up race reports or race information for Wyatt after the fact, expect on a bad weekend. And it's like, okay, well, you're going to tell the good, you got to tell the bad, you got to go both ways. And so, just, finding the ways to be able to let them know what's going on, good and bad, in those scenarios, I think is important too, and communicating that. So yeah,
Mhm.
I think the first thing is you got to kind of know what they want and then, deliver on that. And you can forgo maybe a lot of mistakes.
Yeah. I love that you said you still have to communicate the bad and do that with grace, right? The
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw something somewhere the other day and it just really resonated that your brand is built most in the times that are difficult.
At tough
And
times. Yeah, absolutely.
how
Yeah.
you respond to something going poorly oftentimes is what determines your public facing brand.
Yeah.
And really
Yeah, for
resonated.
certain.
Of course, the one thing that I'm thinking about in that moment, Kelley, is ERX with Nick Visser, but
Yeah. 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 Well,
Megan,
and that's the hard part, like, I mean, even the example that we talked about earlier of me saying, to that reporter, Matt, his name is Wyatt,
yeah.
that spun off in a million different directions with people, and I meant it just as he's got a name,
Yes.
let's call him his name. And it spun off in a lot of different directions of people that were like, well, he said his name underneath it. Can't you read? Or people that were like, yeah, that's right. He's got a name. You go, Mama Bear. Like there were all these different, ways that people interpreted it, which is really hard about social media.
Yes.
And I hate that part because, we can't ever explain enough to like get to everybody that's going to read through and turn it and twist it into their own theory and whatnot. So I hate that part about it. I hate that part about
Yes.
social media, to do that. But you gotta gracefully come up with, um, you know, both the good and the bad and what's working and what's not working.
And sometimes you just have to accept that those are not your people. If they're going to misunderstand
No,
you,
for sure.
they are just not
Absolutely.
your people.
No, I don't listen to half of them because I mean they're much you could stand those people up in front of you and they would never have the balls to speak to you like
Mhm.
that in person
Mhm.
ever, ever.
Kelley, again, thank you for joining us today. And we ask all of the guests in closing if you could give grassroots racers one piece of advice based on what you have learned all over your years working in this space, what would that be? And do you have an example of someone who embodied this advice?
Well, the first thing that came to my mind was really we talked about it a lot is like networking, just get out there working on relationships and just using all of those relationships the best you can, in terms of trying to further your growth. If for me personally, that works in my business part of it, and this isn't really from a grassroots perspective, but is just to really take care of your people. And that mentor for me there was Mr. Rick Hendrick. And when we merged our businesses together in 2018, we had our Xfinity team and Hendrick Motorsports had an Xfinity team. And when Dale went to drive there, we merged both of those teams over here in Mooresville. And if you take care of your people, the people will take care of you, right? But that can be true too in the grassroots world and those relationships and back to networking and giving people the time of the day, whether you got something from them or not that you expected to get. We talked about those intentions at the very beginning, and just because maybe no fruit falls off the tree from the first conversation that you have, doesn't mean that down the road that it might or might not. And, just, I don't know. I could go on and on. I'm a true believer in compassion and kindness and just meeting people where they are and all those kinds of things. I think you probably got that from my book. Amanda, one of the times when Chris and Wyatt, had an incident together from the very first. I mean, we could have got off on a very bad foot, right?
Yes.
We came over, we talked to you guys, as intimidating as it was because we were new in the space and Wyatt's, a young teenager. And, but that set the tone for our relationship. And if we would have never
100%.
done that, how awkward it is just to
yeah,
pass by those pits and be in that same position. And we've done the same thing with Nick Visser. You're talking
Yes.
about that incident at ERX. I mean, you've got to, you got to meet people where they are and realize, we're all in this together at the end of the day. And you don't want to have any, those tense moments are difficult and tricky. And so, meet people where they are and be upfront and is on the same page as you can with them, and recognize that you can agree to disagree. There's nothing wrong with that, but at least you talked it
Exactly.
out, right? So
Yeah, if it's worth
Mhm.
anything, Kelley, that was really intimidating for us too.
that was very intimidating for us.
We're like, oh my gosh, LW and Wyatt are coming over here. But I don't know. Chris is just naturally such a nice, caring person.
And so,
It's,
so are we, right? So
yes, and
but
it shows.
you need to do those things. It could have looked a lot different had we just both ignored the situation and then
Yes.
move on to the next event or the next event or the next event. And you want to just
Yes.
start off fresh at every event, put anything behind you and move on. And also you learn that respect, and you learn more about each other and stuff too. So that
Yeah.
even a moment like that in the future, you don't take the same way because you know more
Yes.
about the person, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So
I love that. That is such great advice. And
yeah.
Kelley, I'm so glad that you were able to come on today. I'm
Yeah,
glad
me
you
too. Thank you guys.
shot me the little Instagram message because you were on our list, but it was like, maybe we'll just wait till our fan base is a little bit bigger. But no, this is perfect.
We can do it again. We can do it again sometime.
Yes.
We're
I love
always
that
learning
idea.
and new insights. So yeah, definitely.
Yes, but
Mhm.
so glad that you came on.
Yeah, thank you,
Sincerely
guys.
appreciate it.
You're
For
welcome.
those listening, we are putting out new episodes every other Thursday, so catch us in just a couple of weeks. But until then, we love you. Bye.